Long-term sobriety is great. That's what we're striving for. But the most important part is that pursuit. The pursuit of living a porn-free life. What is up, you guys? Welcome to the Road to Recovery YouTube channel, a video series to encourage men who are battling porn addiction. And in today's episode, I want to talk to you guys about my last relapse. I struggle with conflict. Whenever there's conflict in my relationship, I use it as a justification for bad behavior. And sometimes that bad behavior leads to me acting out. Now, the reason for this is because when I have conflict in my relationship, I view the world through a lens of anger. So whatever action I take is justified through this anger. And oftentimes, I can feel wronged by my spouse. And when I feel like I'm wronged by my spouse, I don't necessarily want to do right by them. I feel like everything is all out of whack, like there's no order to our relationship. Now, the key to being able to fight through this disorder is by not putting your partner on a pedestal. If you put your partner on a pedestal, then they're going to be the reason for order and everything being right in your relationship. So inevitably, when a time comes when you feel wronged by your spouse, everything's going to feel like it's all out of order. They're not the perfect person that you thought they were. And of course, you knew they weren't perfect, but you put them up on a pedestal as if they were perfect. So now, you don't necessarily want to do right by your spouse. You don't want to do things that are hard, and that can be a problem. For me, this can lead to a relapse, and that is how I ended up relapsing at the beginning of this year. I had some conflict arise in my relationship, and I used it as a justification to act out. I was hesitant to share how much progress I had made in my recovery because there's different ways of weighing out progress when it comes to battling addiction. So I had been clean since 2022, and I felt like I was making great strides in my recovery. But come the beginning of this year, in 2024, I ended up using some conflict in my relationship as a justification to relapse. So my biggest warning to you guys is to make sure that you have the right priorities in your recovery, because my priorities were out of order. When I felt wronged by my wife, I no longer wanted to pursue my recovery. So it made it easier for me to relapse. Now, there were still precautions in place, but it made it more easy for me to ignore these precautions and ultimately relapse. So the number one priority in your life needs to be staying clean for yourself. You need to be a good steward of your recovery for yourself so you can be the person that you want to be, not so you can be the person that your spouse wants you to be. And if you have this as your number one priority, then even when you feel wronged by your spouse, you're still going to be able to have a healthy relationship with your wife going through conflict, a healthy relationship with your girlfriend going through conflict, because you don't have them up on that pedestal. You're not worried about how their actions affect you. You also need to make sure that God is a priority over your spouse. God needs to be the rock in your life, not your spouse. Your spouse isn't perfect, as we already discussed. They're going to make mistakes. So if you have God as the rock in your life, then you're not worried about things being out of whack because your spouse is dealing with some issues that might be creating conflicts. It shouldn't matter if you have conflict in your relationship or not. If God is your rock, then you are going to be able to withstand any conflicts that you go through in your relationship, because you don't have that expectation for your partner to be perfect. They're not going to be perfect. In fact, you can expect that your partner is going to let you down, that there are going to be hard times, that there's going to be moments when you cannot lean on your partner for support because they're going to have their own struggles. But you know what? You have God as your rock. So you lean onto that. You rest in the faithfulness of God. He will always have your back. And then your spouse can have that same understanding when they're going through their own hard times. They have to also put God first in their life. They can also fall into the trap of putting you on a pedestal. So you guys have to have the same understanding in your relationship, that neither the husband nor the wife comes first, but God has to be the number one priority in both of your guys' lives. This is something that I've struggled with for a very long time. When I make bad decisions in my life, I fall into the trap of justifying them because of the circumstances around me. And honestly, it becomes easier in that moment to put the blame onto my wife. I'm no longer taking ownership for my own actions. And that's the dangerous situation to be in, because that's how you can end up justifying acting out. There are different things that each of us men will struggle with during our recovery. For me, it's protecting my recovery during times of conflict. For you, you might have different struggles. You might be struggling with setting boundaries with social media. You might be struggling with fantasizing about past relationships. You might be struggling with the stress of your job. Whatever it might be, you need to identify it and address that issue, and make sure that you're putting God first in your life. Something I've recently been thinking about is the story shared in Mark, where the Pharisee confronts Jesus and asks him how he can get into heaven because he's obeyed all of the commandments. And Jesus answers him and tells him that he's lacking one thing, and that one thing is to sell everything that he has. And this angers the Pharisee. He doesn't want to sell everything he has. And sometimes we can treat our recovery the same way this Pharisee treats Jesus's teachings of how he can get into heaven. We don't want to do that one thing that will be able to help us stay living a porn-free life. We know what we have to do, but we don't want to do that. For me, it's making sure that I'm putting God first when there's conflict in my life. I know I have to be more intentional about pursuing my relationship with God and not expect my spouse to be the person to lean on during conflict. That's never your spouse's job. That's why it's so important to put God first. For you, it might be creating that boundary with social media. You know that if you deleted social media off your phone, that you would be able to live a porn-free life. You know that if you had taken your boundaries serious in your relationship, you would be able to live a porn-free life. You know that if you contacted your accountability partner regularly, you would be able to live a porn-free life. You know that if you read recovery material intentionally, you would be able to live a porn-free life. Whatever it is that you're struggling with, I want you guys to identify that. Identify what is the sell all that you have in your life, and why are you scared to sell all that you have if you know that that's going to lead to you living a porn-free life. And it's important to remember that the most important thing isn't actually living a porn-free life. Because like I told you guys, I was struggling with how I was going to confront you guys with this information. But it doesn't matter that I had sobriety from 2022 to 2024. That might seem like a long time to a lot of you guys. That might seem like a short time to some of you. But the amount of time isn't what's important. The important part is actually the pursuit of living a porn-free life. Let me say that again. Long-term sobriety is great. That's what we're striving for. But the most important part is that pursuit. The pursuit of living a porn-free life is what we need to have in our life. There will be mistakes along the way. The message I want to convey to you guys is not to put your partner on a pedestal. Don't do that to them. You have to make sure that God is the priority in your life and that you're pursuing a meaningful relationship with Him. And when you do this, you'll be able to identify what the sell all that you have is in your own life. And when you identify that and address it, you're going to be able to learn from your mistakes. You won't be making the same mistakes anymore. You will be able to live a porn-free life and reach the road to recovery. So I hope this video was helpful to you guys.